This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Alice Stockton Rossini with my engineer, Rob Barrett. How you doing, Rob? And man, if there was ever a show packed with every conceivable way to devise a story, this, my friends, is it. From doing a social experiment, to using RPGs, as in role-playing games, to real-life experience or doing your own investigation, every single author tonight has a different take. We begin with Rose Sinise Watson. She finally writes a book, but she can't use a real name because, well, it's based on books that came out in the 50s about how to be the perfect wife, okay? Basically advising women to shut up, obey their husbands, and wear pig panties. So think June Cleaver, Rob. Rose takes this to the next level in her book entitled 30 Days of Perfection. So let me get this straight. You pick up a compilation of these wacky good wife rules, you find 19 of them, and then what?
For 30 days, I followed these 19 rules. Keep a journal, see how it goes. And that's what I did. So getting back to the husband, he wasn't supposed to be that cooperative in this experiment. I really expected him to kind of fight me on a lot of this, but he really enjoyed the pampering and really took it to another level. So there are parts where you're like, oh, no, he didn't. No, he didn't.
Why wouldn't he?
Oh, yeah. And I think that he did get into it. There are parts, there's an example. I woke up really, really early. It was either muffins or scones, and I made them that morning fresh. It was from a book that he had given me, this a William Sonoma, brunch cookbook or whatever. And I had made them. I was so proud. And he comes downstairs, and he had these before at a restaurant. And he had come downstairs and says, I'm not, no thank you, no nothing. I was so proud. I'm not really a scone guy. Maybe as a vehicle for oatmeal. Now, first of all, who puts oatmeal on a scone? That's just disgusting. And secondly, it was like I was completely knocked down. So like little things like that, I don't think he wants to be teased at work. Plus, when it was all done, and in the book there's a tally of all the rules. And rule number 18 is like the in the bedroom rule. It's kind of like, you need to be there for your husband in the bedroom, rule number 18. And he was going down the list every day. I have a tally. And he said, what's going on with rule number 18? Why is there an NA? And I said, well, it's not applicable. You were too tired. And he's like, you need to just change that. I'm like, no, that changes the validity of the experiment. And he's like, no, this can't be published. That needs to be a yes. And I was like, you can't let your machismo get in the way of this experiment. Little things like that we decided, or he, really wanted me to change the name. So Rose Sinise Watson is actually my maternal grandmother's name. She was really, my mom remembers coming downstairs. She has 5 daughters. And she would be reading The Feminine Mystique. And she went to college in the 40s, and she was summa cum laude. So she's very bright and raised 5 girls and did it all. And I really liked that about her. And I was like, we'll use her name.
I'm surprised your husband didn't say, why isn't this number 18 number 1?
Oh, because I had to go in the order of the book.
The book put sex at number 18. That's pretty pathetic. Oh, my God.
Oh, I know.
This was your little social experiment.
It was. I was a special education teacher. And before I had left work in California, you need to clear your credentials. And I had to do an action research project. You compile a literature review, you take the research, you apply it to your practice in the classroom and see what works for you, and thereby improving your practice and helping your students. So I thought, I'm going to improve my practice, as homemaker. And so that's why I used this action research format. Yes, but what's good about the book is thanks to the artists at Page Publishing, it's got a great cover. And because it's written in kind of, quick journal form, it's a great, pick it up, glance at it, put it down, gifty book. But it's also quite, it's funny, but it's engaging, and I like it. There's a stay-at-home mom, wife, woman in Maine, actually, that really loves the book and does something with essential oils. And she's like, I'm going to make an oil for rule number 18. And she's taking it around that area. And I just made it available to some stores around here in LA. But I'm trying to get the word out. So
I'm looking for rule number 18 perfume, baby. My rule number 18 oil.
I know. I got really excited about that. I was like, all right, happy reader, go for it.
Go for it.
So we'll see.
All right, keep me posted, Rose. Our next author is trying to give Twilight a run for its money. J. Carol Anderson wrote Crimson Moon, and now she's followed that up with Moonstroke Dark Moon Saga Book 2. Are your fans going wild or what?
Absolutely. Everyone who has read Crimson Moon has just been in love with it and so excited for the next one. It's been a blessing for me. I can't even believe it.
Right. Well, give us an overview for those people who might not know about your whole body of work. It's about vampires.
Yes. For new who not read Crimson Moon, that briefly is about a young girl named Selene who is transformed against her will into a vampire, and she decides that she wants revenge against the vampire who turned her. So she goes about immunizing herself to all of the vampire weaknesses: sunlight, garlic, crosses, all of the general things. She goes about treating herself until they don't bother her, which is unheard of in the vampire world, at least in my universe. Moonstroke begins in the exact moment where Crimson Moon left off, in which Selene is facing off against Colin, the vampire who turned her. She gives him a fair fight, displays her new powers, and in the end decides that she is not a killer, so she releases him, warning him never to come back to her area. She essentially bans him from the state of Florida. And then other things start happening. There begin to be murders around Florida, as well as nightmares and the sense that something is coming for her. And Thorol, who she's begun a romance with, begins showing her some of his memories that reveal that she was not ever really human. Selene, her whole life, has been part of the supernatural world, and she learns about her real parents. And she discovers that the sense that she's being pursued is correct because her father, which was a demon, is coming after her.
You have some imagination, I tell ya.
Thank you. This was a lot of the story behind the Dark Moon saga came from co-written stories, actually. There are websites online that are called RPGs, role-playing games, where you can make friends with other people and you all have your own characters. It's sort of kind of like a text form of Dungeons and Dragons, but they all have different themes. And so a lot of the Dark Moon saga was inspired by things that I wrote with other people.
So you would go on these sites and play a character and develop a storyline.
Right. And I still do that. But the Dark Moon saga was my biggest one. It's the biggest one that I've been part of for quite a while. And I had permission from other people to include their characters in my stories.
That sounds like so much fun.
It really is.
How do you have time to do that, though? Isn't that time consuming?
Well, it can be. It depends on how you like to write. The way that I usually do it with my friends is we do a lot of planning out. We think of, how is this character going to be? And what are we going to do here? What's the setting going to be like? What's going to be going on in this world? And then we kind of plan out how we want things to go. And then we take it from there. And sometimes we just plan a little bit and then we let it go and see what happens, because sometimes stories write themselves. That happened to me a few times in the Dark Moon saga. Things happened that I didn't even have planned. So my characters just kind of took over from me and were like, no, do this. We want this to happen. And so then I wound up surprising myself because I wasn't prepared for something.
You got any advice for young writers?
Don't ever, ever be afraid to be different. That's one thing that really stands out in Crimson Moon with Celine is that, there are vampire stories out there where they don't have the initial weaknesses, like Twilight is a big one. Everybody knows Twilight, but those vampires, they're not bothered by garlic. They avoid sunlight, but only because they sparkle, not because they poof into dust. So if you have an idea that's different is usually what people love because it's not the same thing they've seen in a million other places under different circumstances. If you have something that's different, make it so.
All right, great advice from a 25-year-old woman, by the way, who is blind. And just check this out. When she published her first book, her local newspaper took notice, and now she's a freelance reporter. Our next book, entitled Mogul, is a joint project by a husband and wife team, both teachers, Kimberly and John Rogers. They are avid dystopian fiction readers, think Hunger Games. And after reading these dystopian trilogies about dark and troubled worlds to each other, they finally decided they could do one better. Am I right?
Yeah, we actually wanted to take it from a little bit of a different perspective. We noticed that a lot of dystopian trilogies, society was already gone wrong. And we wanted to write it from a viewpoint of what was going on as it was happening.
Okay, so what's the story?
It tells the story of Regan Salvatore and her family and friends as society is collapsing. And it's a futuristic society. It's set in the future. And so there's this device that they install in your brain, and it's a medical device that they say will, detect diseases and, keep you well and play on your aptitude. But it ends up being a little more than that.
A lot of people in society are very open to the idea of it, while others are more standoffish and, skeptical.
So this book, Mogul, kind of sets it all up, and then are there several books?
And there's going to be 3, and we're about halfway done with the second one.
So do you guys sit there and bounce dialogue off of one another?
Sometimes.
Yeah, we both take different rules, and we set up a chapter list, and I would tackle certain chapters, and Kim would tackle certain chapters. Then we'd come back together, and we'd have to read it together and decide what parts we would like, what parts we didn't like. Sometimes we'd even write the same chapter and not even know each other was doing it. So we'd have to try to meld it together to fit what we actually wanted. And it seemed like I did a lot of the dialogue, where Kim did a lot of the elaboration and a lot of the description of the world that they were living in.
It's definitely 50-50. We don't even know what part at this point.
I mean, that's an accomplishment right there, working that closely with your spouse on a project like this. I would think could be really stressful.
No, we had fun doing it.
We did, especially the setting up of society and the world and the cities. We changed a lot of things around, so we had to actually sit on our couch and say, okay, what do we want to name this? How do we want to set up the cities? How do we want to set up the area outside of the cities, where we redistributed all of the world's wild animals and
yeah, so it's set up there. It's mostly the United States, but it's called FREE, the First Republic of Equality. And the way it's set up, that there's no state. There's a central city, and so ours takes place. It's the modern now Atlanta, but the center city is called Atling, and then the suburbs around it are called Atbury, and then the farmlands around that are called Atwick, and then beyond Atwick is the wildlands. That's all the animals of the earth, and every city is named like that. So Pittsburgh, Pittsling, Pittsbury, Pittswick, and then wildlands beyond it.
Ooh, this sounds like a place I want to go.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Ultimately, what is it that you want the reader to get from this?
I would say, what would you do if this happened to you? We challenged the reader to if this was going on, how would you react? What would you do? Would you stand by and let it happen, or would you try to stand up?
And we kind of set up the characters to where each character took their own route. So there are 3 main characters. One takes the route of, this is a bad idea. Another takes the route of, it's a good idea. The main character is kind of caught in between that, and makes an ultimate decision, which is kind of towards the end of the book on which way she leans.
Mm-hmm. And it's a love triangle too.
Yeah.
So the two boys.
The two boys are on the opposite ends of the spectrum, and she's trying to figure it out.
All right, guys. That's K for Kimberly, J for John, KJ Rogers. All right. We have to take a quick break, but there is so much more to come. So much more to come. Hang on. We will be right back. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you: printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
Hey, thanks for coming back to the Page Publishing Book Club. We so appreciate it. Cheryl Glaze will never forget the day an alligator came to visit. Let's talk about inspiration, all right? For the adventures of Al, the Alabama alligator.
Well, Al actually showed up at our house 8 years ago and made his way to our pond for a couple of days. So after that, I decided that would make a good children's book as to how Al got to our pond.
The only thing I think about is just that kid that got with the alligator in Florida.
Do what now?
The kid, the alligator.
Yes.
Does that make you nervous at all?
The book tells about, that alligators are dangerous. It does have a little part about that. When they got the alligator out of our pond, the precautions they used, because, alligators can be dangerous and hurt you.
So this is educational as well.
It actually is. I've had several teachers in the area tell me that they were going to use it in their classroom because of that.
So when Al showed up in your pond, you didn't want him to hang out there, huh?
No, and actually he was in the road right in front of our house. I thought it was a person laying in the road, actually, and it moved, and my husband said, "That's an alligator." And I'm like, oh, my gosh, no way. Cars were lined up both ways. We live on a county highway. When the wild game and fish man showed up in his truck, he parked way down the street. And I'm like, let's move these cars, get him up here so he can load this thing up. And he asked for a shovel and a hoe, and they pushed it to the side of the road. And it's like, okay, we'll see y'all later. It's like, excuse me, what are we supposed to do with this? So my husband got online, talked to several people, with the wild game and fish, and discovered who we needed to contact to get this alligator out of our pond. That's where he made his way after they pushed him off the side of the road.
How big was this alligator?
He was 8 feet. It was in June, and they said that it's mating season, and the larger alligators will run out the smaller alligators. So he was apparently one of the smaller alligators.
So they're common where you live?
They supposedly brought them into the area years ago to help with the beaver population, thinking we were far enough north that the winters would kill off, the alligators and they wouldn't reproduce. But they've continued to reproduce, and we live about 2.5 miles from Flint Creek. And so they're assuming that's where it came from.
Did you make a connection with Al?
Well, it was really funny. We would have people stopping and just lining the fence looking at this alligator. So after they took Al away, the store across the road put up a sign, "Bring back the gator."
So now you've had a really positive response to your book.
I have had several schools, mention that they do want me to come either read the book or meet with the kids. I had a small book signing at our local ice cream shop, and I sold a few books there, and I think we have a third Friday in our downtown area where people just come. There's booths set up, so I'm planning on doing a booth and have little alligator or reptile toys for the kids, and I have found an alligator game where you throw these little rings and loop the alligator's snout.
That's great.
So I'm going yeah, it's been fun. I have really enjoyed it. So
good for you, Cheryl. Maria Crawford was a #1 tennis player as a kid, but let that dream go in college. Now she's written a book entitled Courting Perceptions. So I'm guessing this is what you sort of imagine what could have happened had you become a champion and just happened to fall in love with a reporter.
Yeah, in a way. Actually, yeah. Yeah, because when I started the story, I kind of wanted to see, where it went, where it took off. And, yeah, that's actually what it was. When I was younger, I wanted to be a famous tennis player. And I guess I let others' opinions like, oh, you can't really do that. That's not realistic. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny because you talk about the tabloid gossip and the paparazzi following you wherever you went. I would imagine, I don't care if you're an actor, actress, sports star, whatever, that's got to get to you after a while.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah. Some of them do a pretty good job of, keeping their life private and separating, the paparazzi and all that. It can be done, but maybe it takes a little extra, extra work. Actually, I had started a few years ago, and I put the story away. I stopped, and then, I don't know, it just kind of kept nagging at me, kind of just kept calling to me, and I found a writing coach, and I picked it back up and just started running with it again. It was always there, in the back of my mind, 3 years to complete it and get it done.
How'd you make out with the writing coach?
Pretty well. She was really good with, helping me set a schedule and keep up with it. And every week, kind of checked in and make sure I was staying on the path to getting it done and completing it.
Do you work full time as well?
I do, yeah. I'm a technical writer, so, I'm writing all the time.
You're a technical writer, so this is your creative outlet.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, I'm just curious because, every writers, they all take different paths in terms of getting it done. And I'm just amazed at people who work full time. Like, I cannot imagine writing a book right now. My head would explode, like getting the time and saying, okay, I have between 2 and 4 p.m. today to write. What if it's not there? What if you're not, what if you're not feeling it,
Right. Yeah. That happened to me quite often, actually, while I was writing the novel. And I don't know. Thankfully, I had that set schedule. I think mine was between 4 and 6. So, I would sit down, and even if I felt like I was blocked or I was, blank, I would just start writing. And learned a while ago, even if it's not perfect, just keep writing because you're going to go back and modify it anyway, So I would just sit down and just kind of let the idea flow, just keep writing. No matter what.
Good advice. Thanks, Maria. Finally, John Carpenter is a psychiatric therapist who set out to prove the truth of some of the supernatural and miraculous events in the Bible, a task he took on after becoming Catholic about 6 years ago. John.
So I started reading and learning about many of those things that they documented and found out I was learning more than most of the Catholics around me knew about. And then I also added in recent scientific and medical investigations and found out that, wow, this stuff is amazing. And nobody was knowing about it. So I just kept digging and researching and gathering information and then decided this has to be a book. People need to know about this information.
So give me a for instance.
For instance, the symbolic communion process, where it's supposed to be the body and blood of Jesus Christ and the bread and the wine. Most people accept that as symbolic. However, there have been some miraculous events in which the wafer started bleeding or flesh started to form around it, or the wine turned into blood, or the communion wafer was bleeding. And this has happened as far back as 750 AD and as recent as like 3 years ago. And the difference is people think, oh, yeah, that could be fake, that could be phony. But they gave it to scientists and medical experts that didn't know where it came from, where the samples came from, and asked them what they were finding. And they found that the blood was from a man who had been tortured and beaten, and the tissue was from heart tissue of a man who had been, abused, beaten, and that it was human blood. But they could not find any DNA. And they sent this to many scientists around the world and kept finding that there was no DNA, yet it was human blood, and every scientist found the same exact result. Now, when I study something like this, I don't just look at one sample. I look for more incidents where this has happened again. And I have at least 6 cases where something miraculous like this has happened. And then when they studied it independently, they all kept coming up with the same exact amazing results. So, it makes you think a little harder about, okay, this isn't just a symbolic process. They're finding real blood and real tissue of a very supernatural origin. And that ranges countries all over the world, from Poland to Mexico to Argentina to Italy, different samples from different cases over time. And all the labs and scientists are top-notch people who are studying this without even knowing where the samples are coming from. So that's a good example right there of some hard science proving something very supernatural. What's amazing is how much good information is actually out there that people don't know about. And I'm very careful about having credible sources and credible testimony, many eyewitness accounts. The book is full of quotes and investigations. My book isn't one about theory or theology or philosophy or opinion. It's about hard facts, investigations, evidence, artifacts, just one thing right after another. And when I find something, I try to find, if something supernatural has happened, then I try to find whether it's happened again. And what I've found is that it may have happened 100 more times, maybe several thousand more times in our history. And that gives it a real reality, because then we know it's not a hoax or fantasy or somebody that's just delusional or something, that it's really something that's happened many, many times all around the world in many different countries.
John, thank you so much. We only had time to share one example of some of his findings, and let me tell you, there's so much more. Oh my goodness, look at Mr. Clock, Rob. Look at Mr. Clock. I told you this show was jam-packed tonight, did I not? It's time for us to head out of here. Thank you so much for stopping by. We so appreciate it. And remember, you can always download this show anytime at 710WOR.iHeart.com. In the meantime, we are getting another show together for next week. Same time, same place, 710 WOR. Have a great weekend.